So every day, more and more investors that were previously immersed into long-term rentals are steadily converting their properties over to short-term rentals. And of course, there are reasons why, other than the increased cash flow and a lot of other reasons that we're going to get into right here in this video. So let's get into some comparisons, right? Comparing long-term rentals to short-term rentals. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna break down both this strategy. We're gonna look at the benefits. Well, for one, let's talk about long-term rentals. Some of the benefits of long-term rentals, because understand there are pros and cons to both strategies. So long-term rentals, of course, obviously, it's more hands-off in theory, right? Quote unquote, I'm gonna put some air quotes on this. And I say that because I am actually going to push back on this theory, okay? And this is steady cash flow. Your rentals are fixed. Your rents are fixed, which in theory makes them very predictable, right? Which is good. Predictable income is good. And I'm still, in a way, going to have a little bit of pushback on that as well. And of course, less regulations. Yes, this is less regulated. Because doing long-term traditional rentals, this has been something that's been going on way before probably any of us watching this video has been around, right? So, but short-term rentals are still so new, and because when something is so new entering the marketplace, yes, there tends to be regulation that comes with it. So short-term rentals in multiple marketplaces can be regulated, and some markets are more regulated than others. So with long-term rentals, it's something that you don't necessarily have to worry about, so it's less regulated. You know, one of the biggest things that pushes people away from doing short-term rentals is the fact that they feel like it's going to be a lot more involved. And honestly, it's actually one of the benefits of short-term rentals. The fact that you can automate all the things that you don't want to be involved with. There are things, even at the very beginning, that you can outsource to save you 70-80% of your time, even with your very first unit. So that's my pushback on this, because long-term rentals definitely can be more hands-off, but short-term rentals can be just as hands-off. So the fact that it can be automated, that's one of the biggest benefits of this business model. And so the fact that short-term rentals can be more hands-off, long-term rentals can be more hands-off rather, but also short-term rentals can be more hands-off as well. Another thing you have to consider the cash flow. Honestly, if you are running your short-term rental business properly, you should be seeing at minimum 3x. I mean, I'm talking about that's at the minimum. Now that it considers the fact that your property is going to be better maintained, because it has to show for every single person that comes in there. And understand, we love the fact that short-term rentals have a specific guest avatar that we select and stay at our property. Because, for example, we know that we serve business travelers. Well, these business travelers, they're going to want to make sure that they stay faced with their company. So they can't come in here and just trash your units. So your property is going to be very well maintained. And the fact that you have to clean it after every single person, understand that your property, when you start it, while it's being well maintained, years later, it's going to look exactly the same. My very first short-term rental property, right now, it looks the exact same as when I first finished up the remodel. And trust me, that's a beautiful thing. So one of the other amazing things that I love about the short-term rental strategy is that you can change your prices. We are charging a daily rate. So that means that we can fluctuate our daily rate. Matter of fact, it's actually in our best interest to fluctuate our daily rate, because our listing platforms love when we fluctuate our daily rates. So charge more money is definitely one of the very key benefits as well. Last thing that I love about the short-term rental strategy is the turnover issue. Because you are consistently serving guests, as long as your property stays a short-term rental property, you're not worried about turnover issues in the sense of a traditional long-term rental. Do you have to clean your properties after each guest? Yes, that's also considered turnover. Yes, I know we have to turn it over to get prepared for the next cash flow and opportunity, right? But in terms of somebody leaving, and you having to do this super deep clean, getting ready for the next person that's gonna spend a year or 2 years in the property, that's not something we have to worry about, because in that time period, one of the biggest issues that long-term rentals have is finding that right tenant, right? So the fact that we don't have to worry about that is definitely one of the pluses of having a short-term rental property. So considering all that, we can literally say that there's, and I'm gonna put air quotes on this, no turn over. So we talked a lot about the benefits of long-term rentals versus short-term rentals. So let's look at some of the cons of long-term rentals versus short-term rentals, right? So some of the disadvantages. With long-term rentals, you got to consider the fact that the turnover issue is a problem. One of the biggest issues, and trust me, coming from somebody who was a landlord, a traditional buy and hold landlord, I understand the plight of a landlord. Trust when I tell you. So one of the biggest issues that I had, even, and a lot of landlords have, the fact that turnover is an issue. Last turnover that I did, I had to spend almost $4,000, almost $5,000 to get that property make ready for the next tenant. So tenants can destroy your property. I'm gonna just say property destruction, right? And another thing you also have to consider is that the eviction process. Trust me, evicting a tenant is not a fun process. I got so tired of it, I had to outsource that task, but that's not a fun task at all. So having to evict a tenant, and usually when you evict a tenant, it takes time. And most of the reasons why you evicted that tenant is because they're not paying. And by the time you still have an evicted tenant, by the time they set the court date, that's still another month that they're not paying. So the eviction process, outside of just a time requirement that is the income deficit that it puts you at as well. So next thing you also have to consider is the fact that you are locked in for a price at when you lease the property, right? You are locked in for that price. That price, now, this can't be a good or bad thing. We talked about it being a pro, which it can be a pro depending on your goals. But if you're locked in for a price, but you know that you can actually make more money, or there's an opportunity, say you have a 2-year lease and you can increase the rent and the rental rates go up, you can't. You're locked in until at minimum that lease is over. Side note, imagine having to deal with an eviction and then you're still having the turnover issues. So you could literally go through a year where you have 3 to 4 or 5 months of no tenant, right? So now your occupancy is low throughout the year, for the year, versus a short-term rental. If I'm 50% occupied, I could still be profitable. So again, 1 score for short-term rentals. So yes, as much as we love short-term rentals as a strategy, because that's actually the way that I'm leaning towards, I'm convincing you and encouraging you to do, it still has its disadvantages. So one thing that you have to consider is the fact that you have to do more research. And yes, you have to do a ton of research to confirm not only the demand for short-term rentals in that particular marketplace, you have to confirm the ordinances in that particular marketplace, you have to confirm the deed restrictions or the HOA restrictions that might harm you in that particular marketplace. You have to also consider researching things like furnishings, right? Are you gonna theme your units? Who are you serving in that particular marketplace? These are research that you need to do that are very important, right? You wanna make sure that you run these numbers and do these research before you tap into any marketplace for your short-term rental property. So research. Another thing to consider is the ordinances, and I'm talking about that in the sense that short-term rentals are still so new. Now, long-term rentals have been around for a very long time, probably since any of us watching this video were even born. But short-term rentals are still new, meaning there's still gonna be restrictions and ordinances that might come in any particular marketplaces. Now, the bad news is that some marketplaces are stricter than others, some marketplaces are more friendlier than others, but I still think there's a great opportunity across the board, but you still have to look out for ordinances. And what sucks is that you really don't know what ordinances could pop up in your particular marketplace. So I'll definitely say ordinance can be an issue for sure. So last con that I want to address for short-term rentals is the fact that you have to furnish these properties, meaning it'll be more capital intensive because you have to spend money on this furniture. So, well, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna put a little smiley face right here, because guess what? We were able to scale our business by still using other people's money to handle that part as well. So even though, yes, it can be more capital intensive, but you can still leverage OPM even on the short-term rental side. So whether you are leaning towards doing long-term rentals or whether you are leaning towards doing short-term rentals, the beautiful thing is that both of these strategies build wealth. And that is always the goal, is to build wealth in real estate. And you gotta understand, there are advantages to just owning real estate, period, as well. So we're talking about long-term rentals to short-term rentals. But at the end of the day, I'd much rather just to get into the ownership. Just get to owning these things, right? So when you own, of course, we're talking about advantages. Cash flow. It's one of the biggest benefits, and it kind of still boggles me to this day why some investors buy real estate not for cash flow. They buy it only for one of the 5 main points that comes with owning real estate. They say, oh, I want to own it for the appreciation. And that's great, but I'm not buying nothing if it ain't cash flow. You feel me? So appreciation, that's another benefit. And that's another benefit, right? Because it's known that real estate appreciates over time, right? It's withstanding the test of time. And of course, the depreciation. That's the tax write-off, right? And that is one of the other benefits of doing real estate. Honestly, I know a lot of investors that own real estate just for that purpose only, just so they can use it to write off in their taxes. And this is still, till this day, the best hedge against inflation. Best hedge against inflation. Even as inflation goes up, that means rental rates goes up. So that means that if your money is parked in real estate, you will always be able to stay on par with inflation, no matter what's going on in the marketplace. And that's one of the best benefits of it. With it being a hard asset means you can borrow money a whole lot easier. It's something you can see, you can feel, you can touch it, you can watch it appreciate, right? Something you can pass down. And so understand, the goal is wealth. Whether you're someone who wants to play it safe and say, you know what, hey, give me my rents. I don't want to know nothing about no short-term rentals. I'm not trying to set up no systems. I ain't trying to do none of that. Just give me my stable rent. The fact that you own is amazing. And whether you want to go that route, whether you want to go the short-term rental route and build a business to run your short-term rentals, or even if you want to do short-term rentals and give your entire property to somebody else to manage it for you and earn more cash flow with the short-term rental strategy, either way is great. But my preference, as you could probably already tell, is to run the bag up with short-term rentals. We love purchasing assets through long-term rental numbers and then exiting with short-term rentals. That's what makes the yield, one of the best benefits of doing short-term rentals, amazing. So appreciate you so much for tapping into this video. Hope you saw tons of value out of it. We talked about the comparison of long-term rentals versus short-term rentals. If you saw value in this video, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and of course, do yourself a favor and watch the next video.